This is the Investor Connect podcast program. I'm Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of the show in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, family offices, private equity, and many other investors for early stage and growth companies. I hope you enjoy this episode. Investor Connect is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors and startups for fundraising. Please consider donating $100 to the program to help others in their investor and entrepreneur journey. You can find the donate button on the investorconnect.org website. Well, hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today we're here with Dan Gonzales, executive producer and host of the Startup Mindsets podcast. Startup Mindsets has interviewed more than 50 entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, and innovation leaders since April 2020 and has inspired people to take entrepreneurial action across the world. Dan, thank you for having me on your show, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Hall. Yeah, happy President's Day to you. And thanks for the super awesome intro.
Great. So where does this podcast find you today?
Yeah, right now I'm in the Bay Area. So I guess in a town called Daly City next to San Francisco. Still working on getting out of here, man.
Well, that's great. Well, we are, brings up a good point. We're in the midst of the great resignation, and people are quitting their jobs to be entrepreneurs in many cases. What do you see happening out there in the startup world?
Yeah, I think the data shows that even pre-pandemic, that there were a lot of people who wanted to be founders and start a company. You'd hear a lot of stories about people, posting on LinkedIn, I left Google to make a startup or, things like that. But I think, with the present times we're in, I'm seeing a lot of people who just resign their jobs because they're not finding happiness with whatever it was that they were doing. And, with remote work just becoming like the main source of the main form of work that, people my age are doing. They're like, okay, if I work from home, I'm kind of able to probably work on an idea that I have. And, sometimes it takes off and they just end up going riding the horse the whole way.
Well, that's great. So what do you find is the driving trend in this space? You talked about millennials, wanting more autonomy and so forth, but what do you see going on there?
Yeah, I'd have to say the driving trend in the space is what's driving the trend is people putting out content, and TikTok and Instagram and LinkedIn kind of being a place where a lot of people in their, early career or, in their 20s are spending a lot of their time. I think that they're seeing other people who do this stuff and they're just kind of getting inspired to try it out themselves and see what happens. But I think what's driving it too is I think that the 9-to-5 is kind of unglamorous to us. I mean, even though we did go to school, a lot of us did, get degrees and study for certain job titles and things like that. I think that for some reason, like they just found the 9-to-5 unfulfilling. So they found working on things that they're passionate about more fulfilling, and figuring out that if you could be good at social media or drive a brand around it, then, eventually customers would want to pay you, and things just eventually take their own path from there. So it's pretty interesting.
So what do you think the long-term implications of work from anywhere and work on anything? What do you think that's going to turn into?
That's a good question, since it's rather just happening right before us. And, I haven't really stepped into an office since like 2020. So long-term implications, there's probably pros and cons. I'd say that I'd rather start with the cons first, where maybe people are losing a touch of sense of closeness with whoever their peers are, since you can only get to know someone so much over the camera, like over Zoom or over Google Hangouts. But I'd also have to say, well, with the pros, I think that there's just people who are having more flexibility, and they're finding that I'd say for me, and I guess maybe yourself and a lot of people, it's easier to work from home since you don't have to, jump on the bus or train or drive to the work office and spend all that time. So definitely more time to yourself. So I think that's a pro. But, at the same time, maybe that commute was therapeutic for some people. And it's definitely, a moving target where you have to figure out what can replace that and, give me that same sense of calm or just space away from the house. Because spending too much time in the house is kind of detrimental sometimes. So that's what I have to say.
Well, I've noticed that when you move to remote work, that you have to put everything online. Everything has to be documented. Everything has to be placed because you're not there to just hand it over to somebody in a conference room. You have to
True.
actually place it online. So there's a real interesting detailed record of work. What is being done? When was it being done? Haven't seen a lot of tools come out. A few, that are working this space, but wondered if there'd be more tools coming out that drive that workflow and audit it and mine it for data. I think there'd be a lot of interesting data that would come out of those workflow tools to see how long does it take to do a project, who actually did what on a project when it's all said and done, and so forth.
Yeah.
So I'm a big believer in data analytics myself, and I thought this is a gold mine of data to come out with to talk about productivity and where you're losing it, where you're winning it.
For sure. Yeah, I think I can see that there's new markets and just new demand for certain services.
So what's
like those you mentioned.
Yeah. So what's the most important lesson you've learned in this area as you start to work from home and work at any time, so to speak?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think that the biggest thing I've learned is that running a podcast is pretty entrepreneurial in a sense too, where it's just there's really no one above me who gives me tasks and things like that. So it's kind of like my own management style comes into play, and what I've learned is that I definitely have to be twice as dedicated, or that much more just driven to to do some of the work, since it could be tedious sometimes. And I think the biggest thing that I've taken away from that is just that you got to be able to adapt to a different working environment, and just manage time efficiently as best as you can, because if you don't, then things get pushed into the next week, and it just becomes a cycle of procrastination, or not necessarily procrastination, but just a cycle of putting things off. And that's probably the thing that people did not like with remote work, was things would get pushed off. But I've seen a lot of companies have success with remote work styles, and it's definitely the future, or the hybrid of work is what's going to happen in my area, at least.
Well, as you go into this process, what's one thing that happened that you didn't expect that came out of it so far?
I think it's something that I'm kind of surprised of is that we were able to talk to 50 people. I think it just started off as a hobby, where we had a friend or two we needed to interview to write a book that we're working on, and there's something that I'm super amazed by, is that we were able to find really interesting people across that we haven't met before, and just became really good connections, and I guess mentors, and people we've learned a lot about in the startup space, just how they operate and how they run their businesses, and what their mindset is when things are definitely challenging. So yeah, just learning new things from people through conversation.
Great. And what's a common myth about your job as a podcast host that you'd like to dispel to the audience? What do you find that is often misunderstood?
That's a great question, Hall. Common myth. Whenever I tell somebody, for example, about oh yeah, I just run a podcast, and I think the myth is that it's easier than it looks, because at first I was struggling a little bit just to find my voice and get comfortable with how I sounded. So while it is easy just to send somebody a recording link and click record, I think that the myth is that it takes a lot of time and practice, or just repetition, to become good at something, and definitely build a brand over. So yeah, it definitely took time, and just learning from prior what do you call that, podcast episodes I've done, and just learning how to improve the content over time.
Great. And what online information source do you find most helpful in your podcasting work?
Would that be okay, is that places I go to for advice, or content, or whatever?
That's right. It could be anything. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if there's exactly something that I guess that I find helpful in particular, but I think just listening to other podcasts and their kind of flow of the conversation, and kind of the topics that they're looking into, and being able to say that, oh, I like that. Well, maybe I can put that into the audio content, or like try to redo what they did, but just with my own sort of
Mm.
voice or conversations with other people, and like putting that on TikTok or Instagram and trying to grow from there. Definitely has been a challenge because yeah, I don't know, it's not something that I was used to doing before this. So there's that. But yeah, I think just seeing other people who are in the space and watching them do it and trying to take what I can from there is what I'm trying to learn and apply to.
Great. And always ask, if you could start a business tomorrow, what would that business be?
Yeah, that's interesting. I have a couple of friends of mine who are working on like a NFT idea, but it has to do with user feedback. So they're trying to incorporate like some form of, I think it's a DAO or DAO or like a DAO, decentralized autonomous. I forget what it's called or how it is, but maybe the angel investors know, right? But just trying to incorporate something into user feedback and trying to reward people who give feedback on software, like who are users of certain softwares, and using the DAO as a way to like monetarily reward them with something that a friend of mine talks to me about a lot, and wouldn't mind me having me on the team. And yeah, just I think that something that has to do with new technology or innovation is what I'd probably start. But hasn't happened yet. But it's not too surprising if it were to happen.
Absolutely. The new DAOs give us distributed autonomous organization gives you a lot of new features to the company. It's online, it's distributed. You can have something called a token, which can give different access or governance or compensation, and it's interesting to do that. It sounds like the feedback thing might be like a bug bounty. If you find a bug, you get paid for it. So incentivize people to
Something like that. Have you ever heard of that?
if you find and report bugs, you always find bugs and don't work around, but if there's no incentive, why sit down and fill it out on the company's website? But if you get paid for it, well, now it gets to be interesting. And if it's non-dollar compensation, well, then that can be even more interesting as well. So it's interesting to do it on user feedback. Why user feedback?
It was my friend's thing, and he worked at a cool company called Reputation.com, and they were just thinking of what they did, what the problem they did solve for was just on people's online brands and reputations where it didn't seem, like they were fitting their persona that they wanted to. But in terms of why user feedback, I think me personally, I'm also interested in just how software, or I mean, how users interact with applications, and what's the missing piece, or like what's a missing link. And getting good feedback is hard, whether you have to give somebody a survey or hunt them down, or you know what I mean, or getting them to be honest. So I think there's a part where the idea that they would just record themselves really quickly, and that would be the feedback. But still working on it, though. Still thinking about it.
Yeah. It sounds like a great idea. You talked about casting it as an NFT. Why would you use the NFT? What's the advantage there?
Not really sure. I think that, yeah, wasn't really sure about that. I think I got DAOs and NFTs mixed up, but maybe on the public side, like if for instance I was a restaurant owner and I needed a review, and I don't know, like maybe if we were to launch NFT, like they'd get special discounts or something. It's just such an interesting concept, the NFTs, where this is it like, how do you get so many people to trust that this is a thing? And it's certainly a thing where people just buy it either to hold it, or they buy it for personal perks or things like that, where they can prove that they have the actual receipt of purchase or club membership, whatever they want to do with it.
Right. Well, I see if you have very good user feedback, valuable content, then the NFT was worth more. You can actually monetize it for more. If it's plain vanilla, not very interesting, well, then it's going to be worth less. And so I guess it inherently incentivizes you to give meaningful, deep content so that you can make that NFT worth more, because that's how you get compensated at the end, is having an ownership stake in there
Yes,
in
right.
some form or fashion. So it's kind of interesting. And then having a DAO makes it interesting in the sense that everybody owns the data, not just the CEO or the main owner or whatever. It's everybody gets to own it. So at heart, you get to share the rewards that come out of it. And sometimes you can do it based on how much you put in or how valuable your content's put in. And so you get into a ratings process. I put in feedback, but then everybody rates on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being low, 5 being high. Is this worth a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? And so if I get a lot of 5s, I'm going to get a bigger ownership piece. I get a lot of 1s, well, I'm going to get a lesser ownership piece. So you have to get into rating and reviewing, because if there's no gatekeeper anymore, then the network has to do that. And so that's kind of needs to be built in there as well. But that's a cool idea. I think I could see that really working out well.
Hey, Hall, I got to ask you, man, since you're an angel investor, what did you ever see that, when Bitcoin was made or Ethereum was, when this was, I guess 2 years ago or 3 years ago, did you ever foresee something like this ever existing? Because the Web 3.0 is mind-boggling just to try to explain it to some people, and then it took me 2 months to figure it out. So
we actually did quite a bit with blockchain back in 2017 and 18 during the ICO white paper craze, and it was a bit heady time. There's a lot of great ideas, but not a lot of real applications being done. And so saw that and believed that blockchain would be big one day. It had a lot of advantages to it. A lot of people doing goofy things, trying to replace Visa, MasterCard with a blockchain system alone, where it's probably really going to be a combination. It's blockchain plus other technologies to get to the speed. And now you see Solana networks and others that are much faster and more efficient. So people once asked me what I thought of Bitcoin. I said one day we're going to call it, the trash 80 of the
that's so funny.
Of the protocol world. If you remember the Radio Shack initial computer. Yeah. At the time, it was this really cool thing, but later it kind of looked back and thought, well, that was what really wasn't put very well together.
Yeah, I remember being a kid and being at a Radio Shack. It's so funny.
That's right. So, in retrospect, it was innovative, but, by today's standards, the competition is going to come up with better solutions and so forth. And so, but what I didn't realize is how much people would put into the coins and so forth, how much that would take off and how much that would appreciate and how fast it did as well. And I remember back in the 2000s, I was taking a trading class, and it's like 2004 or 5. And they said in just a year or two, all of the stock exchanges will be 24/7. They'll be global, and we'll be able to trade any time of the day. And, 10 years later, almost nothing's changed. It was like 2015, 16, and, we're still, 9 to 5 trading, and it's, all the regulatory and so forth. And I think that's one reason why Bitcoin, those things took off so fast, is because the rest of the world stopped innovating. They really didn't innovate for 15, 20 years. And all of a sudden, boom, Bitcoin comes in, and it is global. It is 24/7. It is, secure. There's all the things that people wanted was right there. And people just voted with their feet to go over to it. And now there's more companies private than public. And, there's probably, the exchanges are all going to be online, and, the crypto style exchanges is the future. And the lack of innovation just killed the NASDAQ, New York Stock Exchange. Those things you'll be around for a long time. There's a long half-life on those things, but still it's nobody aspires to go to the NASDAQ. They aspire to go to the crypto these days, because that is the future.
Yeah. Do you think that, that's such a, interesting concept, where it's a new, the public stock market, you wouldn't think that something could come in its way. And I think the crypto market, has certainly, pushed, some competition into the space where it was like a public, you'd never think that anything could rival the public markets. Do you think that, that stuff is here to stay, or would you say it's a fad, or what would you think?
Oh, no, I think it's here to stay. I think it's going to continue, because the market wants global. They want online. They want wallet type structures. I think the world's a little bit tired of walled gardens like Facebook and those things where you have to log in. Everybody's got a LastPass account of 500 passwords and so forth. And the blockchain solves that. You just have a wallet and everything goes into it, and you own it permanently. And then you've got security because the public and the private key are separate from each other, unique from each other. So
Wow.
you're kind of at the limit of what you can do with the walled garden and the enterprise version of software that we have today. And the world's ready for the next generation. And security is a big part of that for sure. You really have to have security on this stuff. And then you're fundamentally putting financial transactions into the internet at the core protocol level. Mark Andreessen once said that was the big miss with the initial internet design.
Sure.
Was it had no place for financial payments, and it was just content. And in many cases, it hurt a lot of gig workers, creatives, and so forth, where their content, once it was on the web, was now transacted freely without you, and you get no compensation from it. So the idea is, if you can make financial transactions a core part of the chain of the network, well, then now you can monetize this stuff more easily. And that's the beauty of the NFT. Anything in there, it has now a payment mechanism that can go with it to compensate you for things. And it's part of the protocol, not something you try to retrofit later on top with varying degrees of success and tremendous hacking that goes with it as well.
Yeah.
So it's going to be
more,
yeah,
pretty knowledgeable, man. That's awesome.
Oh, we just reading about it every day. It's just fascinating. Like I say, we did a lot in 2017, 18, and then kind of backed away from it because most of it was just vaporware, smoke and mirrors, and said, well, let's see, let's give it some time, because these things do take time to build out. And I'd say at the end of last year, beginning of this year, it really became clear that the investors were back at the table looking at these systems, and there were meaningful applications and substantial networks being stood up that could do real things. And so now's the time to really get in and invest. I mean, some people did well in 2017 and 18, but by and far, most of those ICO white papers were, if not scams, were just way premature for what the technology could do. You need to have a little bit of a structure there, and we're seeing that come together today. So we're seeing a lot more interest back into it as well.
That's awesome.
Well, great. Well, in the last few minutes that we have here, what else should we cover that we haven't?
Yeah. What else could we? Well, recently I just became an advisor, or I was luckily advisor/investor in a company called Fathom. They're out of Y Combinator, and major shout out to Rich White, the founder and CEO. What they do is maybe you should look into using Fathom. They're for Zoom. So what they do is they're an AI note taker. So if you ever had to have a meeting and write down notes or type out notes, they basically do that for you and classify like the conversation into notes and bits. So luckily, Rich was really nice to me, and I didn't necessarily have to give him. I guess I'm talking too. We might need to look into this, but he's able to give me some equity, and just super thankful for that. So if anyone is listening and wants to check out a cool note taker for Zoom, totally free, check out Fathom.video.
That's great. We'll put that in the show notes there. How best listeners to get back in touch with you?
Yeah. So if anyone who's listening wants to hit me up, LinkedIn would be great for the professional side. So I'm just Dan Gonzales. Probably attach Startup Mindsets or something into there, and you shoot me a message, or it's Dan from SF on Instagram, and or you could just go to our website, startupmindsets.com, send us a message from there.
Great. We'll include that in the show notes. I want to thank you for joining us today, and hope to have you back for a follow-up soon.
Yeah. Happy to get back in touch, and awesome conversation here. So thanks.
Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Paul T. Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early-stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.